The storm was merciless, a wall of white that swallowed the horizon and roared in every direction. The wind howled like a beast and cut against exposed skin like knives. Snow whipped through the air, each flake a shard of ice, and the world seemed nothing more than endless white and endless cold. The human Marcus leaned forward against the gale. His heavy coat was lined with frost, his goggles fogged, and every breath came out as a cloud that froze on his scarf. He had traveled through many dangerous places before, but this frozen wasteland felt different. It was not just cold. It was alive with hostility, as if the planet itself wished no one to survive. Marcus had planned only to cross the ridge before nightfall and find shelter. He was a traveler, a wanderer, carrying little but his pack and his survival gear. He trusted his instincts and his strength. Yet on this night, as the storm reached its fiercest rage, he heard something strange. At first he thought it was the wind. The storm carried many sounds, moans, shrieks, and whispers that twisted in the darkness. But then he stopped, his heart beating faster. He heard it again. A small sound, thin and fragile, barely rising above the howl of the blizzard. It was not the cry of the storm, it was the cry of something alive. He turned his head, shielding his face from the snow. The sound came again, a faint, broken wail carried by the wind. Marcus froze, confusion mixing with dread. Out here, in this frozen emptiness, there should be no voices, no children, no life, at all. Impossible, he muttered into the scarf wrapped around his face. Yet his boots began to move on their own. Step by step he followed the sound. His instincts screamed that this was madness. Wandering off the path in a storm was a death sentence. But something deeper inside him, something stubborn and human, pushed him forward. He reached a small dip in the ground, half buried under snowdrifts. There at the base of an icy rock he saw it. Something small, curled, trembling, barely visible in the storm's fury. Marcus crouched down, his gloved hands brushing away snow, and his chest tightened. It was a child, not a human child, but alien. Her skin was pale blue, her small body wrapped in torn cloth that had frozen stiff. Frost clung to her lashes and her lips were cracked. Her chest rose and fell weakly as she let out another pitiful cry. Her wide eyes blinked open, glowing faintly in the storm's dim light. And in those eyes Marcus saw both terror and hopelessness. He hesitated. His mind screamed with warnings. He knew the stories told across the galaxy. Alien clans whispering about the dangers of humans, how they were ruthless predators, how they devoured, conquered, destroyed if he touched her. Would she scream? Would she believe her death had come? But then she coughed, a weak, choking sound that nearly stopped his heart. If he left her here, she would not last another hour. Marcus pulled off his heavy outer coat, ignoring the sting of the cold against his own arms, and wrapped it tightly around the child. She shivered violently, shrinking away at first, her eyes wide with fear as though expecting him to strike. "Easy," Marcus said softly, though the storm swallowed his words. His voice was calm, steady, almost gentle. He gathered the small alien child into his arms. Her body was light, far too light and frighteningly cold. She let out another cry, her weak fists pressing against his chest as if trying to push him away. He held her tighter, shielding her from the wind with his own body. Each step he took sank deep into the snow. The weight of the child was nothing compared to the weight of the storm pressing against him. The blizzard screamed louder, as though angry that he had dared to take something from its grasp. Marcus trudged forward, every muscle burning, his mind focused on only one thought: shelter. He had seen a cave along the ridge earlier, and now it was their only chance. His boots slipped on ice, the snow clawed at his legs, and his breath grew ragged. But still he carried her. The child's eyes remained on him the whole time, glowing faintly in the white darkness. Fear lingered there, but also confusion. Why would a human save her? Why would he risk his life for her? She did not understand, and neither did Marcus fully. He only knew that leaving her was impossible. The storm roared as if to test his will. His body screamed for rest. But he kept moving. The sound of cracking. Ice echoed underfoot, sharp and threatening. Every step felt like walking across death itself. At last, through the thick veil of snow, he saw it, a dark shape in the ridge, an opening in the rock. Hope surged through his veins. With the last of his strength, Marcus pushed forward, carrying the fragile life in his arms. The cave mouth yawned open before him, a shelter against the endless storm. He stumbled inside, falling to one knee. His body trembled with exhaustion, but he never let go of the child. Slowly, he lowered her onto the ground near the wall, still wrapped tightly in his coat. Her small breaths came uneven but steady, a sign she was still alive. Marcus leaned back against the stone, his chest rising and falling like a hammer. His mind reeled with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why, in this cursed storm, had fate placed her in his path? Outside, the blizzard continued its furious song. But inside the cave, a fragile new bond had been born. A human had chosen to save an alien child. And though neither knew it yet, that choice would change everything. The cave walls groaned under the weight of the storm outside. Wind howled through the entrance like a hungry beast, and snowflakes still slipped in, carried by the icy gusts. Marcus set his pack down and pulled out a small thermal lamp. Its orange glow spread slowly, pushing back the shadows. The warmth was weak, but it was enough to make the air less cruel. The child lay on the ground, wrapped in his heavy coat. Her small form trembled under the thick fabric, her eyes darting to every corner of the cave. She had the look of someone trapped between fear and exhaustion. Every time Marcus moved, her body stiffened, her fists tightened. She was terrified, not of the storm but of him. Marcus sat a few steps away, close enough to watch her breathing but far enough not to scare her more. He placed his gloved hands near the lamp, letting the warmth soak into his frozen fingers. He could feel his strength draining away. Every part of him begged to rest, to sleep. But the child's weak cough cut through his exhaustion like a blade. He reached for his canteen, uncapped it, and slid it across the stone floor toward her. The sound made her flinch. Her glowing eyes widened, and she pulled the coat tighter around herself. Her lips moved slightly, whispering words in a language Marcus did not know. They sounded like prayers or curses, or maybe both. "Water," Marcus said, pointing at the canteen. He tapped his lips, then tapped the canteen. His voice was calm, low, like a father coaxing a frightened animal. The child's throat bobbed. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, and Marcus knew she was thirsty. Still, she hesitated, suspicion clouding her gaze. Slowly, with shaking hands, she pulled the canteen closer. She sniffed it, as if expecting poison. For a moment she froze, then took the smallest sip. The liquid touched her tongue, and her whole body shivered with relief. Marcus exhaled, a small breath of victory. Minutes passed. The storm outside screamed, but inside the cave a fragile silence formed. The child's breaths grew steadier, though. Her eyes never left him. Marcus studied her carefully. She was unlike any alien he had seen before. Her skin was a pale shade of blue that seemed almost silver in the firelight. Tiny ridges ran along her cheeks, faint and delicate. Her hair was white as frost, tangled and filled with ice. She looked young, far too young to be wandering alone in a death storm. "Where are your people?" Marcus asked softly, though he knew she would not understand. The question hung in the cold air unanswered. The child shifted weakly, her gaze locked on him, her lips parted, and she whispered one word in her tongue. It was soft, broken, but the meaning was clear. Monster. Marcus felt the word strike harder than the storm outside. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He understood. He knew what aliens said about humans. He had heard the stories repeated again and again. Humans were predators, destroyers, unfeeling creatures that took what they wanted. To her, he was not a savior. He was the nightmare she had been warned about. He leaned back against the stone wall, staring at the flames flickering in the lamp. He had a choice. He could leave her here, wrapped in his coat. Let the storm decide her fate. It would be easier. He could continue his journey, lighten his burden. No one would ever know. But as he looked at her, small, fragile, fighting to breathe, He knew he could not. Something deep inside him refused. He had carried soldiers on his back through gunfire, dragged wounded comrades out of burning wreckage. He had lost too much already, and he would not let the cold take another life, not while he was breathing. Slowly, Marcus removed his gloves and reached for his ration pack. He broke a piece of dried nutrient bar and placed it gently on the floor between them. The child stared at it with suspicion. Her glowing eyes flicked to his face, searching for a trick. He pushed it closer with his finger, then leaned back, raising his empty hands to show he meant no harm. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with trembling hands, she reached out from beneath the coat. Her fingers were thin, almost skeletal. She grabbed the food and pulled it close, sniffing it first. She took the smallest bite, her face tensed, waiting for pain. But when nothing happened, she chewed again. Her eyes softened, confusion mixing with hunger. Marcus felt something shift in that moment. The ice between them cracked. Not melted, but cracked. And in that fragile space, something new began. The night dragged on. The storm raged like an angry god. The cave walls shook, and the snow piled high outside. Marcus kept the lamp burning and checked on the child again and again. She coughed less now, her body warming under his coat. Her breaths grew deeper. Her eyes fluttered as sleep pulled her under. When she finally closed her eyes, Marcus sat back and let out a long breath. He rubbed his tired face, staring at the child curled in his coat. Even in sleep, she looked afraid, her tiny hands clutching the fabric as if it was her last shield. Marcus whispered to himself, words lost in the roar of the storm. "You'll be safe, I promise." He did not know why he said it, or to whom he truly spoke. But he felt the weight of the promise settle on him heavier than the snow outside. The storm would pass. But the choice he made tonight, choosing to protect her, to fight her fear with kindness, would echo far beyond this frozen cave. The cave was silent except for the faint crackle of the small fire and the muffled roar of the storm outside. The snow kept pounding against the rocks, but inside, the orange glow of the flames painted the walls with soft light. For the first time since the blizzard began, the place felt less like a tomb and more like a fragile pocket of life. Marcus sat near the fire, his eyes heavy but alert. The alien child slept curled in his coat a few steps away. Her breathing was uneven, sometimes soft, sometimes broken by a weak cough. He watched her chest rise and fall, his mind circling the same thought. If he had not stopped to follow that cry, she would already be frozen under the snow. The warmth began to spread slowly through the cave. Marcus rubbed his hands together, letting the fire's heat sink into his skin. He wanted to rest, but his soldier's instinct would not let him. His ears stayed sharp, his body ready. Even though she was only a child, he could not shake the stories told across colonies about alien tricks, about how some used decoys, about how humans were always marked as prey. But then he looked at her again, her fragile frame wrapped in his coat, her small fingers clutching the fabric even in sleep. There was no trick here, no plot, only a lost little soul trying to survive the storm. Hours passed. The child stirred. In her sleep, her eyelids fluttering, her small voice whispered something, words in her own tongue. Soft and broken, Marcus leaned forward, straining to hear, but he could not understand. Yet, even without knowing the language, he recognized the tone. It was the sound of calling for someone who would never answer. A mother, a father, a family. Long gone, Marcus felt a knot tighten in his chest. He reached into his pack and pulled out another thermal sheet. He unfolded it and laid it gently over her small body, careful not to wake her. For a moment her shivering eased, her breathing grew calmer. When the child finally opened her eyes, the storm outside had quieted to a softer roar. The fire's glow reflected in her pale blue eyes. She blinked, confused, to find herself still alive. Her gaze landed on Marcus, and at once fear returned. She pressed back against the stone wall, her small body trembling. Marcus raised his hands slowly, palms open. His voice was calm, steady, easy. He whispered. He pointed to the fire, then to her. Warmth, The child said nothing. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. Her eyes darted from his face to the flames, then to the food packet on the ground near him. Hunger flickered in her gaze, stronger than her fear. Marcus noticed it and broke another piece from the ration bar. He placed it on a flat rock halfway between them, then leaned back, leaving the space open. His every movement was deliberate, slow, as if showing her she had the choice. Not him. Minutes dragged by. The child's small frame shook as she stared at the food. Her hands twitched, her glowing eyes filled with mistrust. But at last, she crept forward, inch by inch. Her fingers reached out and snatched the piece, pulling it close like stolen treasure. She sniffed, then took the smallest bite. Her expression shifted, first tight with fear, then loosened with relief as the taste filled her mouth. Marcus allowed himself the faintest smile. It was not victory, not trust, but it was a step. "Good," he murmured, though she could not understand. His voice was low and gentle. She kept glancing at him, unsure if his calm meant patience or hidden danger. Later, when the child shivered again, Marcus took a risk. He reached into his pack and pulled out his canteen. This time he did not slide. He held it out in his hand. The child froze, eyes wide. Her lips parted as if ready to call him the monster word again. But Marcus stayed still, his arm extended, the water glinting in the firelight. His face gave nothing but calm, steady determination. Finally, with shaking hands, the child reached forward. Her fingers brushed against his glove and she flinched, pulling back. Her eyes widened as though she had touched fire. Marcus did not move, he simply waited. Slowly, she reached again, this time taking the canteen. She drank, short gulps, then set it back in front of him. Her small voice whispered something in her tongue. Words Marcus could not translate, but they sounded softer than before. The storm outside rumbled like a distant drum, but inside the cave something was shifting. It was fragile, but it was real. Marcus leaned back, watching her. His mind turned to the old warnings. Never trust the unknown. Never risk for the alien. But here he was, sharing his food, his fire, his warmth with one who had been told humans were monsters. The child's eyes closed again, this time not from weakness but from exhaustion eased by safety. Her small body curled tighter into his coat and the thermal sheet. Her breathing grew, steady. Marcus stayed awake, keeping the fire alive. His body longed for sleep, but his mind refused. He had chosen this path. He had chosen to carry her, feed her, protect her. And now the weight of that choice sat heavy on his shoulders. He knew tomorrow the storm would pass, but more dangers would come. He did not know where her people were, or if they even still lived. But one truth burned clear in his chest. He would not leave her, not now, not ever. As the night deepened and the cave glowed with warmth, Marcus felt something he had not felt in years. Not duty, not survival, but purpose. And for the first time, the alien child slept without crying, sheltered in the warmth of a human's choice. Morning came slowly, though in the frozen wasteland it was hard to tell the difference between night and day. The storm had calmed, leaving a pale light seeping through the cave entrance. Snowflakes drifted lazily now, no longer tearing through, the air like blades. The silence after the storm felt almost unnatural. Marcus stretched his stiff arms and added a few small sticks from his pack to the fading fire. The glow brightened, filling the cave with warmth. He glanced toward the child, still curled in his coat. Her eyes were half open now, watching him. Carefully she was awake but too tired to move. He offered a faint smile, though he knew it meant little to her. "Still alive," he said softly. His voice carried no pride, only relief. The child blinked, her glowing eyes narrowing, her lips moved, and for the first time since the storm, she spoke more than one word. The sounds were strange, sharp at times, flowing at others. Marcus could not understand. But her voice trembled. He listened, trying to catch even a hint of meaning. Then, with effort, she formed a single word in broken common tongue. Her accent was heavy, her voice weak. "Why?" The question cut through him. Marcus tilted his head, unsure how to answer. "Why?" he repeated, pointing at himself, then at her. He realized she was asking the one question no one had asked him before. Why had he saved her? He searched for words but found none strong enough. Finally, he said the only truth that came to him. Because you needed help. The child's small chest rose and fell quickly. Her eyes glistened, but not from trust, from confusion, from disbelief. She shook her head and whispered another word in her language. Marcus didn't know the exact meaning, but from the sharpness in her tone, he understood it. Lies. Her hands clutched the coat tighter. She pointed a trembling finger. At him, her lips formed the word again, the one that had haunted him in the night. Monster. Marcus looked down. His jaw tightened. He let the word sink into him without defense. He had heard it before, from others, from rumors, but coming from a child's broken voice, it carried a weight that pressed against his chest. Like stone, he leaned back, staring at the cave's ceiling. Monster, he echoed quietly. His voice was tired, not angry. Then he turned his gaze back to her, steady and calm. If I was a monster, you would not be breathing now. The child flinched at his words. Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, silence filled the cave, broken only by the crackle of fire and the distant moan of the wind outside. Slowly, she began to speak again in her tongue. This time softer. Marcus leaned forward, listening carefully. Her hands moved as she spoke, pointing to the cave wall, then to the snow outside. Her small voice shook as she said names. He did not know them, but he could tell they were names, maybe her family's, maybe those she had lost. Tears welled in her glowing eyes, spilling down her cheeks. Her words quickened, sharp and filled with sorrow. Marcus could not understand, but he felt the meaning in every sound. She had run into the storm because raiders had come. Her village had burned. Her family had been torn away. And in that chaos, the stories she had always been told became real to her. The stories that humans were no saviors, but shadows that brought ruin. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, picturing it. A small village on the edge of the frozen plains, children crying, fires burning, strangers with weapons storming in, and somewhere in that terror, this child running into the snow, believing death in the blizzard was safer than what waited behind. When she finished speaking, her body trembled. Her small frame shook with both cold and grief. Marcus pulled another sheet from his pack and placed it near her. She hesitated, glaring at him as though unsure if it was a trick. But at last, she pulled it close, curling under its thin warmth. Your people told you things, Marcus said, quietly, even though she could not understand his words. They told you humans are monsters. Maybe they were right about some of us, but not all. He sat back, his eyes heavy with memories. He remembered wars fought on distant colonies, villages that had burned not so different from hers, children hiding from soldiers in the dark. He had seen the monster side of humanity too. He could not blame her for fearing him, but he also remembered comrades who had carried strangers to safety, men and women who had thrown themselves between innocence and fire. He remembered kindness, sacrifice, hope. He looked at her again, the alien child who had called him monster, and he whispered, I am not here to hurt you. The fire crackled, filling the silence. The child's eyes stayed locked on him, filled with doubt, but behind that doubt was something faint. Hesitation, conflict. A small part of her wanted to believe. Marcus pulled out a small device from his pack, a translator worn from years of use. He had not trusted it much before, but now he clipped it to his collar. The static hum of calibration filled the air. He gestured to the child, pointing to his mouth. Speak, he encouraged. At first, she shook her head, but then her lips moved. She said something in her language, slow and quiet. The device crackled and translated into broken common. You killed? Marcus's heart sank, but he leaned forward, voice steady. No, I saved. The child blinked, her breathing quick. Her eyes filled again with tears as she whispered in her tongue. The translator struggled, but managed the words. They said, all humans, Eat us. Marcus exhaled slowly, shaking his head. His voice was firm now, not gentle but sharp with truth. I don't eat children. I protect them. The words hung in the air, rough and imperfect, but the meaning cut through. The child's tears slowed, her small body still trembling. Her eyes searched his face, looking for deception. For the first time, she did not look away. Outside, the snow fell quietly, no longer a storm, but a soft blanket. Inside, two strangers sat by a fire, divided by fear yet bound by survival. The story of fear was still alive in her heart, but a new story was beginning. One written not with warnings but with choices, and Marcus had chosen to stand against the fear even if it cost him everything. The storm had broken at last. By midday, the winds had calmed, and the pale sun cast a weak light across the frozen plains. Snow stretched in every direction, smooth and untouched except for the jagged scars where the blizzard had carved into the land. The silence outside the cave felt uneasy, like the world was holding its breath. Marcus stood at the entrance, his boots crunching in the hard snow. His eyes scanned the horizon, trained and sharp. The soldier in him never rested. Even in the quiet, he expected danger. He had survived too many wars to trust peace when it came. Suddenly behind him, the child stirred, still wrapped in his coat. Her glowing eyes blinked open slowly. She sat up, rubbing her thin hands together for warmth. She looked small against the rough stone walls, fragile yet stubborn. Marcus glanced back and gave a slight nod. Morning, he said softly, though she barely understood. The translator at his collar hummed, struggling to catch her whispers. She spoke quietly, her voice weak but edged with warning. Raiders. Marcus stiffened. He turned back to the horizon, his eyes narrowing. He had already suspected as much. Raiders never traveled far from the villages they destroyed. They came back to strip the land clean, to search for survivors, to finish what the storm had hidden. The child's hands trembled as she pointed toward the east. Her voice cracked as she said more words. The translator buzzed. They return. Kill all. Marcus's jaw tightened. He adjusted the strap of his pack and checked the knife at his belt. It was not much against armed raiders, but his training had taught him that survival often came from will, not weapons. He looked back. At the child, her fear was raw. Her small body pressed against the stone as though the walls could shield her from the world. They won't touch you, Marcus said firmly. His voice carried weight, a promise carved in stone. Not long after, the silence broke. In the distance, faint shapes moved across the snow, dark figures against the white. They grew larger as they approached. A group of 6 raiders, their armor mismatched and scarred. Their weapons glinted dully in the pale sun. The child's breath quickened. She whispered something again and again in her tongue. The translator picked up fragments. Death, monsters, hide. Marcus crouched near her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. She flinched at his touch but didn't pull away. Stay behind me, he said. His eyes locked on the approaching figures. The raiders moved with the ease of predators, spreading out, their eyes scanning the snow for signs of life. One of them pointed toward the cave, shouting something in a harsh alien tongue. The group changed course, heading straight for them. Marcus felt his heart steady, the way it always did before a fight. He pulled the child deeper into the cave, then positioned himself near the entrance. The fire inside still glowed faintly, casting his shadow across the walls. He reached for a shard of broken rock sharp enough to cut, his knife in one hand, stone in the other. The raiders' footsteps crunched closer. Their laughter echoed against the frozen cliffs, low and cruel. They thought the cave would hold easy. Pray! The first shadow entered, a tall raider with jagged armor and a blaster slung across his chest. His eyes widened when he saw Marcus standing firm in the firelight. For a moment, surprise flickered across his face. Then his lips curled into a sneer. Human, he spat in broken common. The others crowded behind him, their weapons raised. The child gasped softly from the back of the cave. Her fear was sharp enough to pierce the air. The raiders heard it and grinned wider. Marcus stepped forward, his knife gleaming. His stance was steady, His voice was low but filled with iron. "You'll go no further." The raiders laughed, the sound cruel and hollow. One raised his weapon, aiming it toward the shadows where the child hid. Marcus moved first. His arm swung, the shard of stone flying through the air. It struck the raider's wrist, making him curse and drop his aim. In that heartbeat of confusion, Marcus lunged. The fight exploded in the cave's narrow space. Marcus moved with brutal precision. Every strike aimed to disable, not waste. His knife slashed against armor, cutting where plates didn't cover. He drove his shoulder into one raider, sending him crashing against the wall. Another swung a blade at him, but Marcus caught the arm and twisted hard, the crack of bone sharp in the air. The child covered her ears, tears streaming down her face, but she couldn't look away. She had always been told humans were monsters, but what she saw now was different. Marcus did not fight like a beast feeding on prey. He fought like a shield, every movement pushing the danger away from her. Blood splattered the cave floor, shouts echoed. The raiders underestimated him. They thought a lone human was easy, but Marcus fought with the fury of someone who had carried too many losses. He fought not for himself, but for the trembling child. Hiding in the shadows, one raider pulled a blaster and fired. The bolt seared past Marcus, striking the wall and showering sparks. The noise made the child scream. Marcus's eyes snapped to her, and in that instant his rage burned hotter than the fire. He charged the raider, driving his knife into the weapon's power cell. Sparks burst as the gun exploded, sending the raider sprawling. The last two hesitated, seeing their comrades broken. Marcus stood in the middle of the cave, blood on his arms, his chest heaving. His eyes burned with a cold, dangerous fire. "Leave," he growled. For a moment the raiders wavered. Then, snarling curses, they retreated, dragging their wounded with them. Their footsteps faded into the snow, leaving silence once again. Marcus stood still, listening to the wind. His body ached, his breath heavy. He turned slowly toward the child. She stared at him, her glowing eyes wide. Her hands trembled as she pressed them against her chest. She whispered one word, her voice breaking. The translator buzzed softly. "Protector." Marcus knelt beside her, wiping the blood from his knife. His voice was steady, though his body shook with exhaustion. "I told you," he said. "They won't touch you." For the first time, she did not call him monster. For the first time, she believed